Hello. Today I am sharing about the other AI, the rise and influence of artificial intimacy, a course taught by Esther Perel. And Esther did not share her slides, so I won't be able to bring those in today. So, what you'll see is a lot of me reading the direct quotes that I wrote down from her and following my own notes on the video presentation. One of the big aspects of this course was what it means for us as clinicians as AI increases in its use, and also what it means for our clients and how technology has been affecting us so far. One of the things that is important to note is a study that she referenced that was done in 2018, so pre-pandemic, about people's levels of satisfaction with virtual therapy versus in-person therapy. And I think this is an interesting perspective to take when we're looking at, like, what does it mean for the future of the industry? In this study, when they asked people on a quantitative basis, like rate on a scale how satisfied you are with virtual therapy rather than in person, people rated it as being just as satisfactory. And the researchers wanted to learn more because they were like, that doesn't seem like what we were thinking would happen. And so they did qualitative data comparing virtual and in-person therapy. And what they found is that the qualitative and quantitative data did not match up because people had, and let me double check this, people rated it similarly because their expectations were lowered for empathy and intimacy. They received less effective care, but they didn't recognize the difference. They expected something different than they would get in in-person therapy, and it's suspected that it would be similar for AI therapy or AI chatbots. As we're seeing those begin to crop up, people aren't expecting the same level of closeness, and I would say maybe even like rigor. They're not expecting to be able to get somewhere deep by talking with a bot. Esther gives a really potent example of this by talking about a man who created an AI version of her where he could do video appointments and he could text this AI, Esther, and he described his experience as magical. He felt like he got a lot out of interacting with the AI version of Esther. And what she asserts, of course, is that even though he described it as magical, it's not real psychotherapy, nor is it good psychotherapy, because all of the answers were just amalgamations or generalized summaries of what she might have said based off of past videos in her books and podcasts. So that is important. He wasn't getting the human interaction, but what he was expecting was someone who would maybe make him feel really good. And as we know, that's not what therapy is. We're not soothsayers, right? We're there to be real and human and sit in the discomfort with folks. This is also well illustrated in what she talked about. Her example was sometimes she asks people whether they played on the street as kids. Did you ever play on the street? Did you have games that you made up and rules that you had to agree upon, and what happens when somebody scrapes their knee, and what happens when somebody breaks the rules, and how do you work through that and like still be able to play together, right? How do you get through the struggle and the friction? Because modern life with the technology that we have has removed a lot of the rough edges that are actually really necessary for having a full experience with things. Let me read you a direct quote from her. Technology filtering our lives has left many of us feeling flat. We don't have enough friction, enough unknown. Friction, distance, closeness, play, the unknown are all vital to an erotic experience, right? Like really living and experiencing life kind of experience. Because we have things like people don't have to like figure out how to navigate anymore because we all have maps, right? Nobody's like, or maybe some people are like messing around with recipes to kind of see what happens instead of following a recipe because you can get one for anything at any time and you don't have to have a book. And so one of her assertions is that we need some rough edges in life in order to like have a fulfilling experience with it, to have a satisfying experience with life. And I think she puts it really well in this quote as well. The role of the therapist is to highlight the relationship between choice and loss. Every choice carries grief. The siren song of our screens is that we can make choices without experiencing grief, without questioning ourselves. We can't erase doubt. We have to hold it. Attempts to remove pain, inconveniences, and discomfort is leaving us ill-prepared to face the messiness, the bumps, the smell, the decay, the everyday inconveniences that come with living within close proximity of another human. We need it. Like we need those difficulties because it's a part of the human experience. And as I've begun like sharing this with clients in my work, usually we sit there in silence for a little bit while they ponder it. And I work with a lot of people in their 30s, and so I'm sure if you're working with people who are older, they'll like be like, yes, like I relate to that. And people who are younger might be like a little baffled by it, I'm imagining, right? Let's see, what else is really important to share with you from Esther? So good, I think, for our clients to hear that we need some of that unknown. Also, she takes this very humanist stance where she asks, are we having a mental health crisis, or are we having adaptive responses to the crisis and malaise in our society and the world around us? Most likely, it's both. One of the things that she does with clients when she's talking with them about relationships is she discusses the similarities between how people use tech and people who have dementia, people who are deployed, the nature of digital relationships as those become more and more common. The question is, are you here or not? Because while somebody might be physically present, they might not be mentally and emotionally present. Or somebody might be emotionally and mentally present, but they are not physically present. And it leaves us like our nervous systems aren't quite sure what to do with that. And so she's been showing clients those OG still face experiments that you might remember from Psych 101. I haven't been using those with clients, but I think I'll start to, because it is a really good illustration of what happens in a relationship when the person is suddenly not there, which is exactly what happens with screens. And I'll take just a moment here to bring up some more recent studies on that. I was involved in a study called Project Media, where we were looking at how tech influences human development. And so, like, going into homes and taking videos of how people interact with their babies and doing a modified still face experiment where they interact with their baby and then they look at their phone, because that's what's happening to so many kids these days, right? And also in so many relationships, people are there, they're there, and then they're not. Just like what happened with me a couple minutes ago. I had a notification go off on my phone and I am checking it while I'm filming this. It has become such an integrated part of our lives that we have a hard time removing ourselves from tech, which means that we're not connecting in the ways that humans used to. And so it's leaving a lot of people feeling disconnected. It's leaving a lot of people feeling flat. And so doing the still face experiment, which I think would be even more vital in working with couples, right? What happens when someone's suddenly not present anymore? What happens to our nervous systems? Because our nervous systems don't know how old we are. And we're not necessarily super different from the babies in those videos. So highly recommend looking at those. She shows the video, in fact, in her presentation. And I'm now double checking my notes to make sure there's not anything else that is really important to share. That is, one last one. She talked about social media and calls it a cacophony of self-diagnosis. And I do mean self. And she goes on to say, as clinicians, it behooves us to ask, to what extent do we believe that focus on the self automatically evolves into relatedness and responsibility to others? Now, I work with a lot of folks who are recovering from really like toxic relationship dynamics, really unhealthy families, people who would have relational trauma. And so I do a lot of work with people on recognizing the self, how the self is feeling, like how to regulate one's own nervous system, how to stick up for oneself, self-advocacy, boundaries. I do a lot of that work. And it does raise the question, when people start learning those skills for themselves and then relating to the people around them, suddenly their relationships are changing because they've changed. And it's really challenging. So what Esther does is she invites clients to bring people into their sessions, because people don't exist in a vacuum, right? So she tells it, like, bring in your friend, bring in your sibling, bring in your postal worker you're having a lot of trouble, like, bring in your spouse. And she talks about the importance of opening that door so that we can work more on how we're relating to one another, instead of the very easy trap to fall into of navel gazing full time. So that's some of the stuff that I learned from Esther, and I hope that you enjoy. Highly recommend checking out her work if you haven't before. There's lots of it that's available for free, and she's a really important voice and in our here and now time. So thanks for joining me, and I'll be recording more of these.